Hey guys, what's the crack? Hope you're all keeping well. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope you enjoy the entertainment. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, obviously drop a like on it. So I have just watched the brand new Spider-Man movie titled Brand New Day. Uh, and I thought I would do a movie review. Usually I don't do reviews of movies, but I think the last one I did was for Halloween Ends, and obviously based on that movie, that was more of a rant than a review, so hopefully this won't be a rant. But I thought I would do a review of it just because obviously I've been reacting to the trailers. I was really excited to see the movie and see what happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief uh, review of the movie, and then I will talk about spoilers in the movie. But I will, if people don't want to know any spoilers, I will, let them know when they can stop the video or depart or whatever. But anyway, so I made a few jot down a few wee notes here just to talk about. So in terms of the movie, I thought the story was very good. I really liked the way the story flowed. Um, we got a great introduction to the movie. It wasn't, sort of a slow build up. We got right into the action. It wasn't hard to follow, and some of the scenes were exciting, some were surprising, and yeah, overall the movie flowed well. Had a very good ending. Obviously, there is post credits with all Marvel movies, and I'll talk about that. But yeah, I think this did very well to build on the events from the last movie of No Way Home, obviously, with Doctor Strange casting the spell and everyone forgetting Peter, and we left off in the last movie with Peter sort of, I guess, going out on his own. And this movie really focuses on the effects of that. And as we've seen in the trailer, it focuses, you get glimpses of AMJ and Ned on whatever the movie version of social media is there, where they're posting videos and everything. And you see Peter watching them in the trailer and everything. Film wise, I liked the choice of villains in this movie. There are some twists and some surprises. But obviously we're seeing in the trailer that Peter's battling Scorpion, and I think he is battling the Hand, obviously from the trailer. I will say, if I could make one little notch of a negative about the movie, I would have liked some scenes to be expanded on. And I'll talk about that in the spoilers. But I would have liked some scenes, to be a few more minutes longer, just to uh, to get to see more of those parts of the story. Um, there is a there's a thing that keeps getting teased in this movie, and we never get the payoff from the tease, and uh I was watching the movie, and every time we got the tease and it didn't happen, I was like, oh, thing. But I'll talk about that. Um, I like the back and forth uh conversations and interactions between the characters. Again, obviously, it was seen from the trailer that Peter, as Spider-Man, jumps into MJ's room to ask her to come with him and all, and she's arguing with him, and then she's like suddenly change of thing, and she's like, fine, and then Peter bumps into the Punisher, Frank Castle, and you get the interactions between Frank and MJ, where he's asking her, who the hell is this, and she's like immediately quipping back like, who the hell are you? So I like the interactions with that. There is other interactions with some new characters. One that I thought they were. I thought they were going to do a character from the 90s animated show, but it's somebody different. Um, there are some scenes in this movie that make you think of the Insomniac video game Spider-Man. Uh, but yeah, that's roughly all I'll say about the movie. I thought it was very good. I would definitely recommend going to see it. Uh, I say it does have post credit scene, and it'll be interesting to see where they go with the Spider-Man story after this, and obviously with the upcoming Avengers movies. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with Spider-Man and the characters. One thing we'll say, there are several theories over online that we've seen over the past month about certain things that could happen and certain things that could lead into another thing. Uh, those overall didn't happen. So, some theories were correct, some theories were wrong. But yeah, overall, I say it's a very good movie. I still think, out of all of them, I would still say that my favourite is still No Way Home, because obviously you got, Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire on screen at the same time. Nothing's going to top that in terms of the Spider-Man movies. Um, there was a scene in this movie that it does in a way sort of pay homage to uh, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movie. In fact, two of them actually. But I think that is all I can cover without any spoilers. So yeah, I think the casting was good. I think the story worked out well. The action scenes were great. It had it had a good ending that obviously um works out well for the franchise going forward. I'll just say that. So that's really all I can cover without any spoilers. So all I'll say now is, if you don't want to know any spoilers going forward, I hope you enjoyed this video. I would definitely recommend you go out and see the movie. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. It'd be very much appreciated. And I shall see you again. Take care. Now, if you are still here and you are curious about spoilers and about the movie, or have you seen the movie, let's get into it. So, let's talk about the big reveal of the movie. Well, let me take a drink first. The big reveal of Spider-Man Brand New Day. Spider-Man is Maynard. Blew my mind, totally. No, that is a name that Peter comes up with whenever he bumps into MJ and Ned at a house party, and MJ, because he meets Ned in a nearby store, and then he follows him back to their new apartment they've just moved into. They're having like a party, and Ned's got like this, the whole like thing on the wall about who Spider-Man's identity, and sort of paying homage to Spider-Man, everything. So Peter's looking at that, and then Ned's talking to him, and MJ. I think it showed it in the trailer where Peter introduces that he's a neighbor, and MJ says, "Oh, friendly neighbor," and Peter starts choking on his fingernail. So she asks him, his name, and he's like, Maynard. Hi, I'm Maynard. So she walks away, but yeah. So the big reveal of this movie is Sadie Sink's character, and I was surprised with the reveal of this character, because, as I said in, I think it was the last trailer reaction I did, I thought that the theories of who she could be playing were too easy. So she's playing Jean Grey. She is playing the mutant Jean Grey. But yeah, I thought whenever it was revealed, I was like, okay, so she is playing that character. I thought it was going to be something, because obviously most of the fans and social media were guessing and predicting she was playing Jean Grey. So I thought if everyone's guessing, I thought they would have just revealed that that's okay, yes, she is playing Jean Grey in the movie. But yeah, so what can I talk about in terms of spoilers? Right, so let me start from the start of the movie. So 4 years have gone by between No Way Home and this movie. We get a sort of montage of Peter fighting different villains, and this is what I was talking about. With scenes being expanded, I would have liked some of those scenes expanded to see Peter in the battles against he was fighting like a Scorpion, he was fighting Tombstone, he was fighting the Hand, he was fighting two other guys. I thought it was Hammerhead, but it's somebody else. And then I think it's a Boomerang or Mr. Boomerang. So I would have liked those scenes to be expanded to see more, of Peter fighting these different villains. But yeah, it was just like it was a quick montage of Peter battling and capturing him or tying him up while, he's moving into his new apartment, which is on like this, I guess, like the sort of the top floor, the attic of this building, where the tenant, or not the tenant, the owner or landlord, tells him, says that nobody ever goes up here because it's like full of asbestos and everything. It's like one of those abandoned apartment built or rooms. So he sets up there. He has a new associate on the police force who is Detective DeWolf, and I was sort of talking about, they throughout the movie they constantly have interactions where she's asking how he is, he's constantly getting headaches over the last few years. She's asking him about his health and everything. He's saying about tell your family I say hello, tell your kids I say hello. So the first sort of interaction we get with Jean, it's off screen, but it's a nice little homage to the Spider-Man video game, because we see Peter's got this like sort of app or device. He's got a new sort of AI technology called Evie, similar to Tony Stark's stuff. But yeah, it tells him whenever there's like a crime in progress or something. So obviously there's this armored tank that's bashing its way through the city. It was a nice little callback to the video game where the scene where you have to chase the armored truck through the city that the demons are driving. So yeah, like Peter's on top of the tank and he's trying to find ways to stop it. He gets knocked off, and then that's where we get Frank's introduction, where Frank hits him with the van as he's chasing and he's trying to shoot it at the tank. And there's a funny interaction that plays throughout the movie, where Peter keeps bringing up that he saved Frank's life on Staten Island, and he's saying that Frank owes him one, and Frank keeps trying to play it down. He's like, "You didn't save my life. I didn't need your help." But so Peter incapacitates Frank and then chases after the tank, which is heading for the prison, as a detention center or lockdown facility, where Matt Gargan Scorpion is being transferred to a maximum security. I don't know where it was, the raft or somewhere else, but so the tank crashes into the prison, and when Peter gets the door open, there's this old woman inside, and she's sort of she's talking to Peter, in a menacing way, and he says, "I think it's time you need to get out of this tank." And then she says, "Yeah, that's a good idea," and she mind jumps into another person, and continues talking to Peter, and then mind jumps again, and keeps like jumping from body to body. So it gets to the point where Jane, but obviously she hasn't been revealed at this moment, but she takes over the helicopter pilot that's flying Matt Gargan off the prison roof. So she helps basically Scorpion escape because she needs him. So obviously, Peter and this detective, they're discussing about um who would want to break Scorpion out, and Peter's saying, "Look, you try and keep tabs on Scorpion. There's somebody I can talk to." And this is where we get the first cameo appearance. Peter goes to see Yelena, Black Widow, who is in her office, which is like a day spa. And like she's like she's just like sitting in the water, and telling Peter, right, take your clothes off and get in. He's like, whoa, no, I have to take thing off. She's like, my office, my rules. So you see Peter coming out of like the changing room with a towel and his mask still on, and he's sitting in the water like with his mask on. So he's basically asking her, because that these people seem to be like they were brainwashed or something. He's thinking, is it something like the Red Room? But she's saying that no, it doesn't. It's not that. It sounds more like something like possession, like somebody's taken over them. Um, and she tells him that because she's a new Avenger now, this isn't her area of expertise. This is small potatoes, as she calls it, and tells him that this is his area. And she tells him that there have been numerous attacks on the DCOC, which is the Damage Control, or Damage Center of Control, but it is run by the head is called William Bill Metzger. So Peter obviously goes to see him. Yeah, he goes to see him, and Jean reveals something whenever she was possessing somebody. She says she's looking for Femax, and that's something that's mentioned throughout the movie. Femax, and like he questions Metzger about it, and Metzger doesn't know any relevance to it, but whatever Jean or the person is looking for is in the vault of the DCOC. So obviously I was saying that we got a little homage to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movies. So obviously I was saying Peter bumps into Ned, and then he goes to the house party and he bumps into MJ. MJ has a new boyfriend, and Peter, when Peter walks past, he sees them kissing, and he basically his emotions start thing, because basically it's like he's heartbroken that the person he loves was somebody else. So he leaves the party, and he's web swinging, and you can see like sort of flashbacks of all the times him and MJ were together, and you notice that there's sort of changes as he gets more and more emotional, and it reminded me of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in Spider-Man 2, where his emotions over MJ were causing his powers and his abilities to fade in and out. And we got a similar thing here where Peter's powers or his abilities were increasing because of his emotions, and then obviously we get the scene that we see in the trailer where Peter wakes up next morning and he's in this like web cocoon, um, and he sort of falls out of it and like whacks his back as he falls to the ground. Uh, so so Peter discovers then that he's got sort of organic webs and he's got heightened senses. Uh, he tries to do again another sort of homage to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. He's on the rooftop trying to practice with this new web ability, and he's doing like Toby. He's like, all right, go, what way? It's like, and then he finally gets it. He can't shut it off, so he's like sort of like a spray gun, like the web spraying everywhere. But then he sort of gets the hang of it, whatever way he's able to sort of voice control it. They swing and they'd be like, web, stop, web, stop. So we get to a point where because Peter sees this as a mutation of his thing, he goes to see Dr. Banner. Basically, he gets the idea that because Bruce is using his own sort of inhibitor device to suppress the Hulk, he comes up with this idea to design an inhibitor chip that will suppress these new abilities or new sort of senses. So he builds like a temporary one that begins to work, but then it fails and he sort of the web explodes everywhere. Then we get another interaction with Jean's character, again off screen, because she's using like other people to talk to Spider-Man. This time though, Jean is in Peter's apartment and she tries to get into Peter's mind, but obviously with his abilities he is able to boot her out. I think similar to, I think it's like the spider sense in the last movie, you know, when he was able to avoid Doctor Strange's thing when he was out of her body. So he was able to kick her out. But she finds the note that Peter wrote to MJ, so she is able to discover, I think because Ned posted their location or address online, she's able to find where MJ is located. So we get this scene where it's basically a race to get to MJ. Jean is mind hopping from person to person like a long line like around the city. Peter's trying to swing to follow her. Peter with his EV technology is able to determine like how far Jean needs people to be in order to make the jump from person to person. So whenever she jumps in the mind of a helicopter pilot, Peter traps the helicopter in the air where there's nobody around, so obviously Jean cannot mind jump anywhere. So we get to a part, this is where I was talking about that there's something that's teased but we never get a payoff. So Sorry, my mouth gets very dry when talking. So we get the scene in the trailer where Spider-Man jumps into MJ's apartment, and he said no, she needs to come with him, and I never picked it up until afterwards, but MJ is constantly arguing with him and saying, no, I'm not going. I don't even know if you're the real Spider-Man. You could be imposters, doing your usual. Zendaya is great in the role. So she's doing that, and he's arguing with her, saying that, and then suddenly she's just like, fine. And she grabs her coat, and they swing off. He tries to take her somewhere safe. So they land on this rooftop, and this scene fucking killed me. So they land on this rooftop, and MJ's asking Spider-Man, why is this person after me? What reason did they got to go after me? And like Peter's trying to think. He's like I don't know. I can't explain. So she starts questioning Peter as Spider-Man, about is there some connection between us? Like, do we know each other? Do we go to school together or something? Because you've always saved me and Ned. And like she talks about like the scene in Washington from Homecoming. She talks about obviously over in Europe. She mentioned the Night Monkey suit and everything. She says like, once or twice, that's just a coincidence. You're just saving. But she says, but you have come to my rescue a lot of times. Says there is something there. There's something. Says I feel like my mind has been scrambled, and I can't. I feel like there's pieces missing, and I can't explain it. So we get to a point where we get the sort of Spider-Man scene where she says she wants to test something, so she pulls the mask up to his mouth and kisses Peter, and it takes a few seconds, and then she remembers, and she's like, Peter, is that you? And he he calls her name. He's like, MJ, it's me. And they're hugging, holding. And it's like, oh, finally, she's got it. Fucking gut punch. But yep. So Peter's holding MJ, and the camera's behind Peter, and MJ opens her eyes, and MJ starts to speak, and she's like, hug her, Peter, hold her, show her that you care. And you basically realize it's Jean controlling MJ's body, and it's like, oh, fuck off. So all that was Jean controlling MJ. So I didn't realize at the time, but I clicked that back at the apartment when MJ kept arguing with Peter, and then suddenly she changed her mind. It's like, fine. That was obviously Jean took control, and she's like, right, fine. So she did that so that she could control MJ and get MJ's thoughts about all the time Spider-Man had saved her, and then she wanted to take Spider-Man's mask off so she could see Peter's face and identify him. So obviously at this point, she's teasing Peter as MJ. She's standing on the rooftop, and Peter is just, he has that look on his face where he fucking it feels like he wants to punch Jean, but it's obviously MJ, so he's like, it's just, oh. But even though it's MJ, he still grabs her, uh and then she like sort of kicks off, and does the fall. We see her like falling. Peter dives to save her, and they crash to the ground. MJ's unconscious, but then Jean pulls up in the car, and somebody gets out to basically threaten that she can do this anytime thing. So Peter basically says, right, I give up. I'll stop pursuing your stop thing, whatever it takes to, don't harm MJ. So before the car leaves, Peter, through his technology, is able to take a scan of Jean's face, so you can see that it's Sadie. So he has her face locked on his technology. I forgot to mention there was a scene early in the movie where Scorpion was trying to break into the DCOC, and Peter showed up, and it was revealed that it was Jean again controlling Scorpion, and Peter basically, with his new abilities, his eyes turned black, and he started, beating the shit out of Scorpion. And the scene we saw in the trailer where he grabbed Scorpion and threw him under a police car. The police car got knocked upside down. It injured a police officer. The detective, DeWolf, she showed up, and Jean left Scorpion's body, so he's totally, he's like dazed and friggin' blood pouring out of his mouth and everything, and Peter, his eyes turn back to normal, and he's trying to save the cops, okay, but the detective saying, look, no, look, you're not yourself, look, you need to get this under control. It says this time I can let it go, because we're working together, but it says you cannot act like this again, or I can't protect you. So there's a lot of anger and aggression in Peter's new abilities, and that's why he created the inhibitor chip. But yeah, so Peter takes MJ to Frank's place, for him to protect her, because he needs to go and chase after Jean, so he needs MJ to be protected somewhere that Jean can't find her. Again, this is where we get a good interaction between Peter, Frank, and MJ, where Peter again is talking about the Staten Island thing, and Frank, they're arguing over each other, and MJ's just standing there looking back and forward, and then they're both saying to her, like, what do you think of this, and she's like, I don't care, I just want to go home. And Frank's like, that's a fucking good idea, both of you piss off, so Peter convinces Frank to let MJ stay. He says he's making chili. Peter's like, don't eat the chili. So Frank has some equipment and technology for Peter to construct a new inhibitor, and with MJ's help he's able to improve it so that it doesn't burn out. So it works perfectly on him, so he designs another one to use on Jean so that her powers can be suppressed. So they get a face match, and then that is where it's revealed her name is Jean Elaine Grey, and it shows that she's showing up in person at the DCOC and is, taking people out. So Peter, swings off and leaves MJ with Frank. There's scene just before that where Frank is talking to Peter. Obviously, Peter's still wearing his mask now, and Frank's like, even for, drink a cup of coffee, you can't even take off the mask and everything. And he's lecturing him about MJ, and Peter's trying to play it all. I was like, I don't know her. She's just fine. He's like, and he tries to tell me, he's like, do you know what I would do? If someone I loved was still here. He says, I wouldn't stop. He says, I wouldn't leave a breath. I certainly wouldn't be hiding behind a damn mask or coward. He says, I would give anything to be with that person, and Peter, the night before, had fallen asleep with the note that he wrote MJ in his hand. So, because of the drama of arguing with Frank, and then the technology locating Jean, he swings off. MJ, she wakes up and she's telling Frank not to let Spider-Man go off alone. So Frank chases after him. We get to the DCOC, and Sadie is obviously talking to Metzger and saying that she wants VMAX. We still don't know what that is yet, but she keeps saying about VMAX, and they're locked in the vault. And you can hear a lot of banging and thumping. And Peter arrives, and security are taken out, the members of the Hand are taken out, there's walls smashed, glass everywhere, and he confronts Jean, and she throws Dr. Banner's inhibitor watch at him, and you basically see you see Smart Hulk at first come out, but he's being controlled by Jean. So Jean, as Hulk, starts attacking Peter until Frank shows up and is just offloading his gun at Hulk's head, which is also hurting Jean mentally. And again, we get more back and forth between Peter and Frank, where Frank's saying, I should have brought a bigger gun. And Peter's like, well, what to tickle him to death? And he's so it gets to the point where Hulk, our Banner, Smart Hulk, kicks because of all the attack. Jean is mentally hurt, so this gives Smart Hulk a chance to kick her out. So he reverts back to Bruce. So Peter and Frank are arguing again, where Frank says, look, I'm going to go and deal with the main source of the problem. I'm going to chase after Jean. You can deal with this. And so they're walking off, and Peter's like, do not kill her. Don't kill her. And he's like, oh, you fucking pussy. He says, I'm going to do it my own way. It's just, do not. And things, so they're going back and forward. And then, obviously, Bruce is back in human form, and he's like, looking around destruction, and he's like, oh, God, no, not. What happened? Who did it hurt? So Peter is trying to he's trying to get him to attach one of the inhibitor chips so he doesn't Hulk out again, but Bruce is already going through the change. You can feel it. And Peter's trying to calm down, but this is where we get the scene where the Hulk comes through, and he's like, no Banner, no girl, only Hulk. So he just grows up, and Peter's like, oh shit, I didn't know you could get that side. So they start fighting. Peter grabs one of Shocker's gloves, so he's fighting the Hulk. Jean mind jumps into Frank, so Frank starts placing explosives on the vault. And then I don't really understand. Peter's fighting Hulk, and he sort of he ties him up to the building with his webs, and there's a moment where Hulk grabs him, by the throat, and Peter's saying, Dr. Banner, Bruce, it's me, Peter, we're friends, and Hulk stops and sort of acknowledges him, but I didn't understand it, because this was supposed to be the Hulk, so why would the Hulk be responding to Peter saying, oh, it's me, Peter, Dr. Banner, so, but whatever happens, Hulk lets go of Peter, and because he's tied up in the web is connected to all this loose bricks, and part of the building are pulling Hulk backwards off the building, so Hulk lets go and falls out of the window down to the ground. At the same time, the explosives detonate, and the vault door collapses, and Frank, being controlled by Jean, starts shooting all the guards, and Metzger obviously drops to his knees to surrender. Sorry, my throat gets so bloody dry. So basically, Peter comes in and gets the inhibitor chip on Jean, and then Metzger shoots a tranquilizer at Jean. Frank comes back to sense. He's like, what the fuck? He says, is that my gun web to the wall? But Jean says the word Sarah before she falls unconscious. So basically, everyone gets sort of either taken away or medical help. Bruce is back in human form. He's strapped to a gurney, being taken to a ward, and where he's asking, did I hurt anyone? Did anyone get hurt? It's then revealed on TV thing that he got brought to a psych ward. Peter's talking to Metzger, saying about that Jean mentioned the name Sarah, and Metzger says that she was a colleague who sadly passed away. Jean must have found the thing in my mind whenever she was controlling me. I was thinking of her whenever I was under Jean's control. So Spider-Man says, "Oh, right." So Jean gets taken away by the DCOC. So this next scene is again what I was talking about, where they kept teasing someone and we didn't get the payoff. So Peter comes back to Frank's place, and he's shouting before he gets in the door. He's shouting to MJ, MJ, you're a genius. This worked at all. MJ found a note. So she confronts Peter about the note that he had written. And he tries to start talking, but she tells him to take the mask off. She says that she wants to have this conversation face to face with Peter Parker. And so he takes the mask off, and she realizes it's, the guy from the house party. So he tries, to explain. She gets very angry, saying like, why did you never tell me? Why did you not come and find me? Why, why did you make this decision for me that I wasn't to, to know about what happened and everything. So Peter basically tells her, about why, and he tells her that he had lost Aunt May and he didn't want anything to happen to MJ. MJ claps back that she's almost died several times in the past 24 hours, so he's not doing a very good job. But then we get the revelation then that MJ says that she can understand why the girl in this letter would love you, and she says, I'm sorry, but that's not me. I don't know you. I don't have those memories of you. I don't, I don't love you. And it's just, oh God, not again. So, she says, she says she's sorry and says goodbye and goes to leave. But then she asks, she comes back and she asks if Peter can swing her back home because she's no phone or no way of finding like how to get back. So it's a very awkward swing back to her apartment. We keep getting this point of view throughout the movie of Peter in like first person, where he's swinging. And this time, MJ's just holding on and Peter's just swinging quietly. And, forcefully, it's just like, swinging, letting go. And, you can tell by no way when you're in a fucking bad mood, or, you're pissed off. And it's just like, he's like forceful swinging, and MJ's just, sitting there quiet, trying to hold on. So he drops her off, he's going to leave, and she invites him upstairs to meet and hang with her and Ned, because they were meant to be friends. So Ned's, I forgot to mention, Ned's got this like spider tracker where he's tracking Spider-Man's location when he appears. And it starts going off and saying the Spider-Man's in the vicinity. And when Spider-Man walks through the door with MJ, so they start hanging out. They're like playing with like the Star Wars action figures. They're doing movie quotes on Lord of the Rings. MJ shows him a sketch he did of Ned and Peter unmasked, sitting together, playing. So I wasn't even looking at the time. I thought this was going to be the end of the movie, but so we get another twist then that Peter tells her about the rooftop where Jean was in control, and that Jean kissed him, and he kissed her back and thing, and he says, "I'm sorry, I thought it was you, and I wanted you to know that." And she says, "Well, thank you for telling me." She says, "I don't remember anything from that." She says, "It was just a complete blip from from my apartment to the street." And Peter sort of clicks on to that she doesn't remember anything, and then he connects it to Metzger telling him that he was thinking of a colleague called Sarah while Jean was in control. So basically, he comes to the realization that Metzger lied to him, that Jean wasn't in control of him. So basically, Metzger and the DCOC, Sarah was Jean's sister, who also had the same abilities, and she was teaching Jean how to use her abilities to mind hop. The DCOC captured Sarah while she was going to get some ice cream for her and Jean. Jean tried to run to Sarah, but Sarah, before they took her away, she took control of Jean's body and made her run, I guess, before anyone's seen her, made her run away from the area. So by the time Jean got her control back, Sarah was gone. And so we find out that VMAX was a word or an image that Sarah telepathically sent to Jean. So she's been looking for Sarah, her sister, so she keeps constantly asking where her sister is. The DCOC have Jean strapped to a chair in a room, like a sort of glass cell, and they're trying to use her powers to copy them. And Metzger basically reveals that they started this with Sarah, and that because Jean is more powerful, they're hoping that she can be a thing. And he reveals basically that Sarah died during the testing, and this is where we get the reveal of what VMAX is, because when they're doing their testing on Jean, it's exhausting her, and she's like falling backwards, with her head, and she looks up at the ceiling, and she sees the vent above her. Sorry. Uh, the label on the vent says Vent Max, but the part of the label is like scratched off or burnt off, so it just says V Max. And so that's, you realize then basically that was the last thing that Sarah could see before she died, and that was the last image that she sent to Jean, and that is what Jean has been looking for. What is VMAX? And that was basically it. It was the last thing Sarah said before she died, for under the, I don't know, the torture or testing of the DCOC. So this obviously sends Jean into fucking overdrive, and she goes full power on with her abilities. She's able to smash the cell, take control of the workers in the other room. At the same time, Peter arrives, and he starts fighting the guards on the roof. Basically, Jean keeps, shouting at Masker over and over, "This is where my sister died. You killed her. That's where my sister died." And then she lets out a telepathic projection that freezes like everything in a large area around the island. Frank is driving to the place in his van. He sees everyone sort of running, and he also sees all the people trapped in the frozen state. So he's trying to figure out what to do. He's on the phone to Peter, and Peter's battling members of the Hand who Jean was controlling. And, there's the scene we got in the trailer where, Frank says, whatever you're going to do, you need to do it now. So he's fighting Peter's fighting the Hand, and they're using like these sort of electric stun sticks, and they, destroy his web shooters. And then just basically beat the shit out of him. I mean, like, it's like about seven or eight on one, and it's just, he's just getting hit over and over. He's getting punched, he's getting kicked. Jean, talks to him then, and says about, you're constantly trying to erase Peter Parker. As then you wonder why, your abilities are trying to, surpass and overtake, the human. So she says, who are you? She says, are you Peter Parker or are you Spider-Man? So we get this moment where one of the members of the Hand is about to strike Peter with their katana, and he stops it with his organic webs, and he's like, I'm both. So we get this awesome scene where he's just like, obviously using his heightened senses, he's dodging everything. He leaps up the air, comes down, and does like a spiral webbing, and just webs everyone up in like this massive net of web. he busts in the door, and he starts trying to talk with Jean. And then Jean tries to stop him. At the same time, Frank is on a roof across the way with a sniper gun, trying to set it up, and he's trying to get a shot at, he's aiming towards, trying to find where, Jean and Peter are. So we get this scene where Jean is talking about, her powers are stronger now, and she's even strong enough to get inside Peter's mind. And at this point, Peter says, go ahead. So she enters Peter's mind, and we get this scene with Peter sitting in a room on a like a bunk bed, and May enters, and she's talking to him. Obviously, it's a flashback scene too. It must have been after May found out about Peter's identity, and Jean was before that trying to tell Peter that people like us, we're judged and hated because we're special, because we have these powers. But in this scene with Aunt May, she is talking about to Peter, and she's saying, that she doesn't care about his abilities or his extra powers or things. She loves him for him, and there will be time where people will try to twist you into doing bad things, but it's you who decide what to do with your power. It's you that decides what makes you you. And we get the scene where it's basically, because Jean is in Peter's mind, she is in the point of view of Peter. So it's as if Aunt May is saying these words to her, and Aunt May is hugging her, and so then Peter appears in the scene, and he sits beside Jean, and it's just it's like a bonding scene where they're not looking at each other, but it's just a scene where he says, I'm sorry about your sister, and she replies, I'm sorry about your aunt. And it's the talking about, Jean says that she has nobody, and Peter says, well, you got me. And for so long I've been trying to do this alone. I've been trying to move forward by myself, but I realize I can't do that. I need the people around me. I need others. And the next thing, Peter, there's just silence, and Peter gets this, obviously spider sense, and you can hear this gunshot go off. So back in reality, Peter, just in mere seconds, Peter grabs Jean and pulls himself in front of Jean, and Frank's shot hits Peter in the back. And so you think everything's okay, and Peter's like, you're right, yeah, and then Jean moves her hand away, and it's covered in blood, and Peter drops to the floor. You can see the blood pouring out from his back behind where he's on the ground. He's telling her, to get out of here. People will be coming. And so it cuts to, a scene where Frank is carrying Peter's body into a hospital and screaming for help. There's a news report about saying that Spider-Man is in a critical condition. There's crowds of people outside the hospital with, candles, a vigil, and signs of, save Spider-Man, and we need our Spider-Man. So we get a scene of Jean sitting in a park, and she has this focused look on her face, and she's breathing, taking deep breaths back and forth. She's like sitting there, she's like, and what she's actually doing, it shows that she is actually controlling Peter, and she is breathing for him while he's, in the hospital with the oxygen mask over his face, and she's actually controlling his body and breathing for him. So Peter finally wakes up, and Frank's there, and he's saying that Jean's safe. She's gone, but she she was here. She was doing some magic voodoo, and looks like she was keeping you alive, while you were in critical condition. So we get a nice scene here where Frank sort of breaks down. He's trying to apologize for shooting, and Peter's saying it's not only it's all right, and he's like, no, it's a lot of things, but all right. He says, I've seen bravery before in my life, says, but nothing like you ever did. And it's a touching moment, where Peter tries to make a joke where he's like, are you crying? And they're like cracking up and thinking on. And he's like, I can't believe it, I've seen you crying. So there's a crowd outside. The crowd is still outside the hospital. So Frank comes up with a plan to help Peter escape. So Peter's walking out the hospital doors in his normal clothes. And as soon as he walks through the door, you hear the crowd shouting, hey, it's Spider-Man, and everybody's cheering, and Peter's like, thing, but they're actually looking up at the hospital window, and Frank is wearing Spider-Man's mask and gloves, and he's like, you see him inside the hospital, he's like, got her. So Peter's watching, and then he disappears out of the crowd. So the movie ends where Peter's back to normal. He's on the phone to the detective, and she's saying, look, you just need to rest up and get back to full health. Don't worry about any crimes. We can solve this. There's a thing goes off in his alarm about a robbery, and he's like, here, I can meet you there. It's a couple of blocks, and she's like, no. She says, look, we can handle a robbery. She says, look, just, she says, take some time out of the suit and go and relax. So he goes to a cafe to get flowers, I think, for May's grave. There was a scene before that where he was at May's grave, and he says, I've been thinking, and I think you'll be happy to know that I'm not going to do this alone anymore, so um, we get a follow up from Yelena where they are investigating the DCOC. Metzger has disappeared. Jean is seen on a bus out of the city, whether that is leading up to her potentially being found or recruited by Charles Xavier in a future movie. But yeah, so we end with Peter's in the store and he's obviously looking to get more flowers and he sees Ned drinking a coffee. So he walks over. He initially was going to, what he's been doing at the start of the movie, he was going to just leave and walk out, but he decides to go over to Ned. And, at first Ned doesn't acknowledge who it is, and then he's like, oh, the guy from the house party, your name was May something. So Peter says, I'm Peter Parker. And he's like, oh, right thing. So he shakes Ned's hand, and then he does the thing they do throughout the previous movies, the handshake and the elbows, and they do it in sync back and forward, and ends with the thing, and Ned's just like in awe of how he knew this, and then he's like, you see him looking down, and then he looks up and he's like, Peter, and Peter smiles, and that's where the movie ends. So I'm hoping that is acknowledgement that Ned has remembered Peter, and it's not just a thing of another fucking tease, because we got enough fucking teases without payoffs in this movie. There is a post-credit scene, and it's just a simple one of Ned's spider tracker, and it's just gone off insane. Spider-Man cannot be found. Spider-Man cannot be found. And then it dings, and it's like, Spider-Man found. Location unknown. Location unknown. And the map starts to zoom out until it's a map of Earth, and it's like location unknown. And it zooms across the map to an area in space and shows like Spider-Man's location in this area of space thing. So, and that's where the scene ends. So I'm assuming that is setting up. I don't know if Spider-Man's going to be in Doomsday or if he's at least going to be making an appearance. I think that is setting up a battle world for Secret Wars, where we're gonna have Spider-Man and all the others, on this world trying to fight in these different battles. But yep, so that was the movie. I really enjoyed it. I said, fucking, just the scenes with MJ, like that scene on the roof, where you think that MJ's remembered and Peter's finally got her back, and then it's just the rug's pulled out that it was Jean controlling MJ, and it's just like, oh, fuck off. And then finally at the end, where Peter comes back and Jean has found a note, she's read it, and you think it's going to be a payoff where she either remembers or Peter tells her everything and they're finally back together. But it's like I'm not that person anymore. It's like, oh, you're fucking teasing us. So at least, hopefully now, at least if we can at least get something with Peter and Ned back together as friends, and get him back. Hopefully we're not setting up for Ned to be the next villain, because obviously there were teasing that in the previous movie, where both Toby and Andrew's Peters were saying that their best friend turned evil and things. So hopefully we don't go down that road of Ned end up like a villain. But yeah, really enjoyed this movie. As I said, the story was great. The only negative I always said was just the battle scenes against the other villains, like Tombstone and the Hand and Boomerang. I would have liked to see more of those scenes expanded, to see Spider-Man fighting those villains. Like we got a good scene with Tombstone where he's holding Spider-Man on a rooftop and he's like, if I drop you, who do you think? How long do you think it take you to hit the ground? And Peter webs his face and then pulls him off the roof. And then he's captured. So I will like those scenes expanded. Maybe there might be in like a expanded cut or director's cut. Maybe those scenes are expanded. But yeah, I really enjoyed that movie. I thought it was very good. As I said, yeah, I was surprised that they revealed Sadie as Jean Grey, because obviously a lot of people were predicting that, and the theories were saying that she's gonna be playing Jean. I thought that it was gonna be revealed as something else. It's just like, no, it's not Jean. It's totally something totally different. But no, she is going to be playing the new Jean Grey going forward. So it'll be curious to see how her character develops. Obviously, it wasn't the Phoenix, but we did get a glimpse of Jean's power when she's angry and destructive, and she does have the ability to, kill people, if she's, a hatred. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops going forward, But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with the Spider-Man franchise. Apparently, they're saying that this could be the first movie in a new Spider-Man trilogy. There has been talk about introducing Miles Morales at some point. And obviously we will see what happens with Tom Holland as Peter going forward. Initially, he said that he didn't want to be playing Spider-Man in his 30s, and he did say recently that he might have to change that statement and say that move the goalposts, because at the moment he loves playing Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and he wants to continue in the role as long as they'll have him. So I think that would be good. At some point, introduce Miles Morales, and we get the scenes of Peter, training Miles until the point where it's Miles is ready to take up the mantle. But yeah, there was, as I said, there was some theories online that did not happen. So there was theories that Peter was going to die in this movie, and that somehow the symbiote was going to connect with Peter and bring him back to life, and that's how we get the black suit. I mean, I thought they were going that direction whenever Peter got shot by Frank and he was bleeding out. I thought, and you see the scene of Frank carrying his body into the hospital. I thought that's where we were going to go. I thought they were going to see a scene of, maybe either him dying in the hospital or being, too far gone for, medical care, and either somebody from like an organization like the New Avengers, something, coming up with this idea about this symbiote thing that can be join and, heal them or something. But no, they didn't go that route. So I am curious to see if we are going to get Peter wearing the black suit at some point, whether that comes in the Avengers movies or whether they leave that for a future Spider-Man movie. But yeah, Spider-Man Brand New Day, loved it, loved the characters. I think I put it on Twitter. I'd like to have at some point book an appointment to visit Yelena's new office, her lovely day spa. Because there was a scene there where the detective, the wolf, she's saying that she had a meeting with Yelena. Peter says, "Oh, how did you find the office?" She says, "Very soothing." Says the water was very soothing for my skin. But yep, I really enjoyed that. Definitely recommend to go and see it. And so that now leaves us waiting for Avengers Doomsday. Whether Peter will be in that or whether he'll be making a cameo, maybe where they recruit him to either fight Doom or whether he's recruited for the events of Secret Wars. I don't know, we'll see. Obviously that post-credit scene showed that he is off-world now in space at another location that was not found or not known, so it could be just a incursion or the creation of Battle World. So we'll see where it is. Anyway, yep, so that was my review with non-spoilers at the start and spoilers at the end. Hope you enjoyed it. Go see the movie. If you enjoyed this review, drop a like on the video. I'd be very much appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I shall see you again for more videos. Anyway, take care. It's a brand new day.